This is lesson 249, Isaiah chapters 13 through 17, Oracles against the Nations. In the previous lesson, we had a great vision of the new people of God, a sign and a standard held up to every nation, a great calling together, a calling back of the exiles, a shoring up of the remnant, and a reconciliation of the nations. And this lesson begins two lessons on what happens to those who refuse the offer, and that is judgment. Again, we have here God creating people with free will, and free will means the choice to choose against God and to choose your own destruction, and as the Catechism says, the choice to declare the offer of salvation as nothing. To the text now, chapter 13, verse 1, the burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz did see. Now at first, that might seem like an odd choice. Babylon, again, is not yet really a player in the Middle East. The main question here is, what are we going to do about Assyria? Assyria is going to capture the northern kingdom. Assyria is going to threaten Jerusalem and besiege Jerusalem. And here's this crackpot prophet talking about Babylon. Who is Babylon? Where is Babylon? We haven't heard about them for centuries, since the Tower of Babel. That'll change, of course, in the second half of the book of Isaiah. The prophet will foretell the downfall of Babylon to the Persians, and we see that is prefigured here. This reminds me of the book of Judith. You'll remember the book of Judith. That was a leader. It's a story about a leader, Judith, a heroine, the Jewess from the north, who fights against the general Holofernes and defeats Holofernes. And he is a general of Nebuchadnezzar. And again, it kind of seems out of place. You want to tap the author of Judith on the shoulder and say, well, don't you mean Assyria? No, we mean the enemy of God's plan of universal salvation. We mean he who would set himself up against God. We mean Nimrod. We mean Babylon. We mean the enemy. Lift ye up a banner upon the high mountain. Exalt the voice unto them. Shake the hand that they may go into the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my sanctified ones. I have also called my mighty ones for mine anger, even them that rejoice in my highness. We're talking about angels here. Are we talking about men of good will joining with the angels? The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts musters the host of the battle. They come from a far country, from the end of the earth, even the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. Therefore shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt. And they shall be afraid. Pangs and sorrow shall take hold of them. They will have a pain as a woman that travails, and shall be amazed one at another. Their faces shall be as flames. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause light to shine. And I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogance of the proud to cease, and I will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. I will make man more precious than fine gold, even a man than a golden wedge of Ophir. Therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. And it shall be as the chased rabbit, and as the sheep that no man takes up. And they shall every man turn to his own people, and flee every one into his own land. Every one that is found shall be thrust through, and every one that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. And to me, anyway, in my reading, that's the key word, joined. Everyone that is joined to Babylon shall be thrust through by the sword. And their children also shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. And that's a terrible thing. That's a terrible thing. What can I say about that's a terrible thing? It reminds me of the Canaanites And we had that question of whether or not God justified or God commanded Joshua to commit genocide in the Holy Land against the Canaanites. And we had the children of the Canaanites, we had them suffer and die, and there's no nice way to say that. And now here we're talking about the Babylonians, and those that are joining with the Babylonians, their children will suffer and die. And Isaiah is saying that this will happen in the prophecy. We know that it will happen in the historical books. We read that it did happen. And that's not God's plan. God's plan is to bring the nations together in peace. But this will happen. Sin is terrible, and the effects of sin, ever since Cain and Abel, have been deadly. And their houses shall be spoiled, and their wives ravished. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver. As for gold, they shall not delight in it. The Medes, the Persians, and this does happen historically, they will not be bought off by the Babylonians. They will conquer the Babylonians. Their bows shall also dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb, and their eyes shall not spare the children. And Babylon, the glory of the kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees, excellency shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. And it shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation, neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there. But wild beasts in the deserts shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. The land itself will suffer. Reminds us of how the land of Israel will suffer when the nation is taken into exile, and then the land of the Babylonians will suffer also, and the wild beasts of the island shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant palaces. And her time is nearer to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. Reminder here, Isaiah is talking about the destruction of Babylon, and Babylon isn't even a problem yet. It's Assyria that's the problem right now. And this will come to pass. This will come to pass in Isaiah 45. Now, if you try to chop up the book of Isaiah, as unfortunately our chronology does, and I'm guilty of this, but you might lose that Isaiah is internally coherent and consistent. What are we talking about in Isaiah chapter 13? Well, the same thing we're talking about in Isaiah chapter 45, verse 1. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus. Cyrus, the leader of the Median Persians, whose right hand I have held, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of the king, to open before him the gates, and they shall not be shut. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel mine elect, I have called you Cyrus. I have called you Cyrus by name, and I have even called him, or let him be known as, the Anointed, the Messiah, the Christ, small c, anointed to do a job, though, to subdue the Babylonians. Chapter 14, verse 1, For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land, and the strangers shall be joined with them. Again, that's the key word, joined. Here's the idea. You join yourself to Babylon, you will fall as Babylon falls. You don't join yourself to Babylon, and what will happen? God will plant you, Israel, in your own land, and strangers shall be joined with you. Join with Babylon, fall with Babylon. Stay joined with God, and the strangers will be joined with you, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And in the New Testament, St. Paul will talk about the ingrafted Gentiles to the stump of Jesse. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. This was a prophecy to a scared people, saying those people who are those rulers, those warriors who are coming after you and are going to kill and are going to capture, they will be your servants. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow, and from thy fear, and from thy hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve, that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon, and say, How hath the oppressor ceased? The golden city ceased. The Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. We were reading earlier about the rod of the Assyrians. Don't worry about the rod of the Assyrians. Don't worry about the rod of the Babylonians. Worry about the law of the Lord. For the Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he that ruled the nations in anger, is persecuted, and none hinders. The whole earth is at rest, and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Yea, the fir trees, the trees themselves, rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, Since thou art laid down, no feller is come up against us. And that reminds you of the earlier chapters. In chapter 10, it was Assyria that was an axe cutting down the trees, and now the trees of Lebanon, the fir trees, the cedars, are singing. The land itself, the land herself rejoices. The trees rejoice because Assyria has been cut down, because Babylon has been cut down. But it goes far beyond that. Verse 12, How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Jesus saw Lucifer fall from heaven. He took a third of the stars with him. But how art thou fallen? That's the key word there, fallen. Joined with Babylon, you fell like Babylon. You joined with Lucifer, you cast out of heaven, St. Michael the Archangel. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nation? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. It is arrogance. In Greek, hubris. The Assyrians had arrogance. Even the Edomites living in those high places, high rocky cliffs, had arrogance. The Babylonians, arrogant. All cut down. Lucifer, arrogant. We read from history, from the Persian Wars, about the arrogance of the Persian leaders. Hubris. And I don't need to tell you about hubris for nations and for politicians and for individuals. Pride cometh before a fall. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation. And that happened to the Tower of Babel. It happened to Assyria. It happened to Babylon. It happened to Lucifer at the dawn of creation. For I will rise up against them, saith the Lord of hosts, skipping down there, and cut off from Babylon the name and the remnant and the son and the nephew, saith the Lord. So what's the difference between the fall of Israel and the fall of Judah and the fall of Babylon? Well, verse 22, I will cut off from Babylon the name and the remnant. God will preserve the name Israel. God will preserve the name Judah. God will not preserve a remnant from Babylon. Totally cut off, and now we turn, after talking about Babylon, to Assyria. The Lord of hosts hath sworn, saying, Surely as I have thought, so shall it come to pass, and as I have purposed, so shall it stand, that I will break the Assyrian in my land, and upon my mountains tread him under foot. And this will be fulfilled in Isaiah chapters 36 through 37. It could be thought of as the historical interlude in our lessons. So we have one prophecy fulfilled in Isaiah 45, another prophecy fulfilled in Isaiah 36. Isaiah, as we said before, is abundant. Then shall his yoke depart from off them, and his burden depart from off their shoulders. This is the purpose that is purposed upon the whole earth. Universalism in Isaiah. This is the purpose that is purposed upon the whole earth, to remove the yoke of Assyria and to put on a yoke that is easy, a burden that is light. The law of love, the golden rule, the great commandment. And this is the hand that is stretched out upon all nations. For the Lord of hosts hath purposed, and who shall disannul it? And his hand is stretched out, who can turn it back? I'll tell you who can't turn it back. Next we talk about the Philistines. The Philistines can't turn back the hand of the Lord. Skipping down, but verse 30, I will kill thy root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant. Again, what's the difference between the fall of Israel and the fall of the Philistines? The Philistines have no remnant. It's that remnant. It's the key point from the prophet Isaiah and from the entire biblical narrative. A remnant escapes. And God uses that remnant, using again the weak to humble the strong so that all must give glory to God. And next we turn to Moab. Now why are we fighting again? Why are we picking on the Moabites here? We have Amos and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and here we have Isaiah issuing prophecies against the Moabites. These are Lot's descendants, but But where did Lot get his descendants? After the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot got drunk, and his own 2 daughters, I guess they must have thought the world was ending or something, but they laid with their father and they were pregnant by him, and here we have the Moabites. So how do you want to preserve that remnant? Do you take matters into your own hand, or do you trust God? And the Moabites did not trust God, but it's not a racial thing. It's not a genetic thing or an incest thing. We remember Ruth, an ancestor of David, an ancestor of Jesus. Ruth was a Moabitess. But what do we say about the Moabites again? I will bring lions upon them that escape from Moab, and upon the remnant of the land. The remnant eaten by lions, not preserved. And next we have, after the Babylonians and the Assyrians and the Philistines and the Moabites, we turn against Ephraim. That's the tribe from the north. Ephraim, a son of Joseph, and Damascus. And Ephraim was not the northern kingdom of Israel allied with the Syrians, allied with Damascus, the Syrians, not to be confused with the Assyrians, but allied with Damascus. The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken up from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. The cities are forsaken, and they shall be for flocks which shall lie down, and none shall make them afraid. The fortress shall also cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant from Syria. Again, the remnant is lost from Syria. And they shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith the Lord of hosts. And in that day it shall come to pass that the glory of Jacob shall be made thin, and the fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. And it shall be as when the harvestman gathers the corn and reaps the ears with his arm. And it shall be as he that gathers ears in the valley, Rapham. Yet gleaning grapes shall be left in. There will be a remnant from Israel. Gleaning grapes shall be left in, as the shaking of an olive tree. There are 2 or 3 berries in the top, in the uttermost bough that you can't get to. And in that day shall a man look to his Maker, and his eyes shall have respect for the Holy One of Israel. The law will survive in people's hearts, if not in the government. And weren't we talking about Ruth a moment ago? And he shall look not to the altars, the work of their hands, neither shall he respect that which his fingers have made, nor the groves, nor the images, or the idols. In that day shall his strong cities be a forsaken bough, as the uppermost branch which is left because of the children of Israel, and there shall be desolation, because thou hast forsaken the God of thy salvation, and hast not been mindful of the rock of thy strength. Therefore shalt thou plant pleasant plants, and shall set it with strange slips. So again, the question, are you going to join with the foreigners? Join to the Babylonians and fall with the Babylonians and have the remnant cut off? Or will you stay faithful to God and his law and his covenants and his love, and have the other nations grafted into you? In the day shalt thou make thy plant to grow, and in the morning shalt thou make thy seed to flourish, but the harvest shall be a heap in the day of grief and of desperate sorrow. Woe to the multitude of many people which make a noise like the noise of the seas, and to the rushing of the nations that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. Did we not start out this lesson with the gathering of the armies of God and the angels of God and the men of good will? And now we have woe to those who trust in military might. And what was one of the sins of Israel? One of the sins of Israel is they joined with Syria. Sounded like a good idea. Sounded like they could maybe fight against Judah, maybe capture some of the land from Judah, maybe prevail in that civil war. It didn't work. They trusted in their own strength, their own armies. The nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters, but God shall rebuke them, and they shall flee far off, and shall be chased as the chaff of the mountain before the wind, and like a rolling thing before the whirlwind. And before at evening time trouble, and before the morning he is not. This is the portion of them that spoil us, and the lot of them that rob us. Whether it be Babylon, or Assyria, or Edom, or the Philistines, or the Moabites, or Damascus, or our own neighbor, our own brother, or even Lucifer. Before the morning, he is not. And this has been lesson 259.